Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagen. We are back here in Studio 130 for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the Gold Standard in Iowa Conservative Podcast. We have John Hendrickson and myself here in studio today. John, are you ready to go?
I am, yes.
Good. That's seems to be a consistent refrain from you. When I drag you in here, you're always ready to go.
So this is my favorite part of the day.
Good. It kind of is mine, too. It beats the heck out of real work.
Yeah.
So, we have a really big show today. Actually, I say that in jest. I'm not entirely sure everything we're going to cover, but we do have a show planned. We're going to talk about taxes today, which should come as a surprise to absolutely no one. A little bit of presidential politics, a little bit of Iowa politics, and hopefully it'll come out just fine. Before we go any further, just a reminder that we are, if you're listening to us on audio, which you can find on any major podcast platform, but we are on YouTube and Rumble, so don't forget to check us out there. We'd love for you to be able to see what it is we're doing, which is sitting behind a giant white conference table talking about taxes. So if that is more exciting to see, if you could watch it happen, then you should definitely be on YouTube or Rumble. Okay, those administrative items out of the way, John. You were very eager to talk this morning at the pre-production meeting about RFK Jr. coming to Iowa.
Yes, yeah.
So are you? You're not an RFK Jr.
No, I'm not.
Voter,
no, by no means.
What do you got on that?
I was just surprised that he had a big event here and trying to collect signatures to be on the ballot in Iowa for 2024, and of course he's got a uphill battle of getting enough signatures to be on ballots and across the nation. So, but it appeared that he had a fairly good turnout.
Yeah, where was it at? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Was it here in Central Iowa?
Yes, I think it was in Des Moines somewhere.
We were talking earlier. That has to be one of the biggest challenges for a non-party or third-party candidate to actually get the signatures for ballot access.
Yes,
across the country, because it is definitely, the system is in favor of the two-party system. So,
and I've talked to I've got a few friends who are more, I'd say, describe them more libertarian that are actually supporting RFK.
I actually saw another piece this morning, and I don't have it with me, so we probably can't do too much with it. But talking about really the relative decline of the Libertarian Party or movement over the past several cycles. Is RFK Jr. the candidate for that classical libertarian voter that maybe voted third-party libertarian for, who was it back in, was it 16?
Yeah, it was former governor of New Mexico, Johnson.
Yeah, Johnson.
Gary Johnson, yeah.
I mean, so that voter, do they end up in the lion's share of those voters with RFK Jr.?
Possibly, and the people I think of that I've talked to that are I'm not a libertarian, but these are strong libertarians. They're very much find RFK very appealing. Yeah. A lot of it is with his vaccine, against the vaccine and COVID response, and some like his foreign policy, and but it also, I think, it depends on who the libertarians nominate. If they do nominate a candidate this cycle. So, but RFK will probably take a lot of those votes.
You're the presidential historian here in the office. My perspective is that if there has been a decline in the libertarian movement, a big chunk of that is simply because of the rise of Donald Trump, who has probably pulled some of those voters, being that he is we'll call it an atypical or non-conventional candidate himself, although he's flying under the Republican banner.
Yeah.
I think he's pulled some of those Gary Johnson, Ron Paul sorts of voters over into his camp.
I think so. And one thing about Trump is he's built a coalition. I mean, he's not in just your traditional Republicans, but also some libertarian folks, a lot of blue collar individuals, and polls are showing more Hispanics and African Americans.
So I want to, before we move off RFK Jr., I guess I haven't seen what sort of proposals or where he's at on fiscal policy, on taxes. I think we know what we're getting with Joe Biden and Democrats.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a general idea what we're getting with Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress, although I'm not entirely sure what it is they'd really go for on taxes. But what would we get with a President Kennedy?
I think it would be. I don't think he's come out with any specifics on tax, but I'm guessing he's still very liberal, a very liberal progressive. So I'm guessing we would get a somewhat very progressive, almost Bernie Sanders style economic agenda coming from an RFK administration. Even though he appears to be libertarian, I still think he has a strong tendency to support the big government style policies.
He's definitely left of center on major social issues.
Yes, yeah.
And it just really, he caught the eye of a lot of folks on the right because of his response to COVID and vaccines and everything. Okay. Last question quickly before we move on. And I guess I'll narrow this to Iowa, but nationally, I guess however you want to answer it. Does RFK Jr. take more votes away from Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
That's a good question. There's been a lot of debate over that. I would probably say from Joe Biden. I think the Democrats are most concerned with RFK in the race.
I tend to agree with that, although we've talked about third-party candidates historically, and it's sometimes very hard to really identify who they pull from. But okay.
And I don't see RFK being similar to Ross Perot in '92, where a lot of Republicans shifted to Perot.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so taxes. Moving on. Today is tax day, April 15th, as we're recording this. So your taxes are due. If you're one of the handful of people that might listen to this, before the end of the day, please don't forget to file your taxes. So you have. You've had a really good op-ed that's been picked up several places lately, and most recently, I think over the weekend, was in the Cedar Rapids Gazette.
Yes, yeah.
And sort of a counterpoint with our friends from Common Good Iowa. Talk about what and I know because some of what's in there we've talked about in previous episodes. But I just want to take a moment to celebrate, the John Hendrickson publication rate.
This op-ed focused on the taxpayer protection amendments that we've talked about that would call for the first one being proposed would basically require a 2/3 majority vote of both houses of the legislature to increase the income tax. And then the second one would constitutionally protect a single flat tax rate in Iowa. And so in 2026, right now, we're scheduled to go to a 3.9% flat tax. And if we have that amendment, that means we couldn't go back to a progressive income tax. And so a multi-tier tax rate system. And so this has generated a lot of debate right now. And of course, we're philosophically opposed to Common Good Iowa on this. And you've debated Mike Owen several times. Yeah. And most recently on public radio. But anyways, their argument is that, this is just tying the hands of the legislature and basically...
you say that like it's a bad thing, John.
Yeah. Well, but they say it's, of course, their favorite talking point now is, everything is anti-democratic. But I argue that this is actually good policy. Because one is that taxpayers do deserve protections. There's other funds that are protected constitutionally, and also I think there's plenty of evidence that shows that Iowa has not been reckless in our fiscal policy, and also that protecting what we have done is in the best interests of not just taxpayers but our economy moving forward.
Yeah. No, that's all very well said. And we talked about, reminded folks of the process of amending the Constitution. And it bears reminding folks, ultimately the people of this state get to decide. They will get to vote in the simple majority whether or not to ratify these amendments. But I want to take a little bit of time here to talk about, or at least one of the criticisms here that, well, maybe it's not criticism. This idea that it's anti-democratic. And because we're just requiring a different threshold on a vote of the legislature, it still puts the hands in the legislature. It just makes it more difficult.
Yes, yeah.
And many other states have this or a similar protection, right?
Yeah, there's about 16, 17 states that have this requirement, and including very liberal states like California. That California has a 2/3 requirement, and that's not a bastion of conservatism. It's very liberal, and I think that argument is meant to more scare people than, and because it all it does is require a higher threshold to raise taxes, and what it does, it actually, if the legislature wants to raise taxes, it will force a future legislature under that amendment to build a coalition in order to do so, right, and to sort of build a consensus, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
And we were talking this morning, and I think this was after pre-production, but we were talking about how some people will say, well, what if you have an emergency? If we have another derecho or another natural disaster, won't we need to raise taxes? And my understanding in recent history with the natural disasters I've had, we haven't had to raise the income tax as a result of that. And so I think a lot of that is just it's trying to find an argument against this.
So a couple of other arguments against it. Todd Dorman at Cedar Rapids Gazette on the opinion page, I mean, we didn't really get to this, argued that, well, what in the world is the need for this, because no one's talking about raising taxes, and the Democrats and the progressives would never raise taxes. What do you have to say to that?
Well, that's what they want to do. I mean, they're not going to openly come out and say that, but this is the trend we're seeing in other states where Democrats have control. They're trying to either raise their income tax or create new taxes, and the most popular one right now is a wealth tax.
Yes.
And so, I could see that happening in Iowa, where they would try to create a massive tax.
Right, and this is the point I wanted to get back to, because you have the 2/3 majority amendment, but you also have a flat tax amendment.
Yeah,
and I've heard it questioned. Well, if we have the 2/3 majority raise taxes, do we really need the flat tax amendment? And I would say yes, we do, because of this idea of a wealth tax down the road. And there is no doubt in my mind that progressives would like to add, call it a wealth tax or a millionaire tax or whatever it is, to try and play class warfare and grab more of that money from wealthier Iowans.
Yeah.
And so you get the added protection of the flat tax being constitutionally protected in there as well. And so I think both are very worthwhile amendments. And yes, I think the broader protection is probably the 2/3 to raise, but that flags, because they could still meet that in a future way down the road legislature to create a millionaire tax, wealth tax, whatever you want. But then it would be just hard prohibited.
Yeah, and the other thing, what they really don't like about the 2/3 majority requirement is it interferes with their spending, because that's at the heart of this as well, because they call it investment. And so Democrats will say, we need to invest more in education, we need to invest more in the environment, all this, and that translates into we need to ratchet up spending in Iowa on all these programs. And in order to do that, they're going to have to raise taxes.
Right.
And so the 2/3 majority is, and to a certain extent, makes it harder to raise taxes, but it also will help control spending. And they don't like that.
Yep. And we know that Iowans, especially Americans in general, don't want to pay any more in taxes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Regardless of whatever services they may or may not say they want or are willing to cut, they feel like they are overtaxed.
Yeah, and our polls showed 68% support the 2/3 requirement, and then the Register poll had, I mean, it was overwhelming majority, favored gradually eliminating the income tax.
Yep. Well, to that end, John, I wanted to kind of spend a little time today on this article that the Des Moines Register reported on this, wrote a piece on it, but clicking through to the actual article, which is at self.inc, and I'm not familiar with this website, but there's some kind of interesting numbers in here. How much the title of the article is A Life of Tax. How much tax will Americans pay over their lifetime? And ranks all 50 states. But the average American will pay $524,625 in taxes throughout their lifetime on an average. And that is a little over a third of all of their lifetime earnings are paid. And we're not just talking income taxes, it's all forms of taxes. But on average, an American will pay more than a third of their income to government by way of taxes. I think that's stunning.
It is, yeah. And Iowa came in overall 22nd with
22nd highest.
Yes, 22nd highest at $524,580
over the course of a lifetime.
Yep.
And I think it is important to note, just as we've talked before, we're in the middle of phasing in some pretty significant income tax rate reductions.
Yeah.
And so I would expect if we revisit this in a couple of years that we'd be a little higher on this list. But the top states aren't going to surprise anyone. New Jersey coming in at number 1. If you live your entire life in New Jersey, you will pay over half of your income in your life back to city, county, state, school in New Jersey.
Yeah.
That is,
one interesting thing about that is you look at that map and, states like Florida, for example, they're providing the same amount of services as New York or New Jersey or California, and but they're doing it for a lot less.
Yeah. There's some other interesting numbers in here too. The most, this probably doesn't come as a surprise, but most of that amount that you'll pay of your life is in income tax, followed by property tax. But these liberal states that are just topping the list, and I struggle to think that they're getting better services for it. Any other thoughts on that, John?
No, but I think this this reflects other surveys that we've seen. Like last week we were talking about the new rich states, poor states rankings that kind of showed the same thing.
Yep. And I don't bring this out just to continue to compare Iowa to the rest. That wasn't the point. I just here on April 15th, the day that Americans pay their taxes,
and it also reflects the in a sense the growth of government at all levels. And this is a direct result as government continues to grow, as demand for more government grows. It's going to take more taxes to pay for that, and what drives taxes? It's government spending.
Yep,
and that's exactly it. And it doesn't matter what the tax is, whether it's property, income, sales. It's all government spending that drives it.
We talked about that last time, and I think that's the important thing. And so this article does try and get that. What's your total bill for the privilege of existing?
Yeah,
and what are the consequences that government gives to you for being a productive member of society? And it appears to be that it is by taking over a third of everything you make. I think that's too much. I think, and it's not even. Look, as a matter of fairness, I think it's too much, but it does also get in the way of our prosperity and our growth.
It does, absolutely.
Because every dollar that they take away from you for the government purpose is a dollar that you're not cycling through the economy, that you're not investing, that you're not spending, that you're not starting a business with. And those dollars are going to be a whole lot more productive to society and our economy at large than they are simply cycling through government. And there's the real investment, which we put quotation marks around.
Yes, yeah.
Where the left calls it investment and the money is gone. And you may get some ancillary benefit down the road, but it's nothing compared to the benefit that comes when those dollars are invested and they reverberate through our economy.
Yeah.
That's the real investment.
Yeah.
Because that's an investment in America, and it's an investment in Iowa.
That's a great way to explain that. That really is. You're absolutely right.
Well, good, because that's about all I got for today, too, John. So
it reminds me of, and I should have wrote the quote down, but the original Ghostbusters movie, there's a line where Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray are talking, and Dan Aykroyd tells Bill Murray that he's never worked in the private sector, and he says the private sector expects results.
Yes.
In the public sector, doesn't being in the university all of his life.
Well, as we podcast here in the I guess we're the private sector. I guess we can call ourselves that.
Yeah.
But well, I appreciate you coming back around to 1980s comedies with Dan Aykroyd. And that's two episodes in a row.
Yes.
So I don't know who knows where we'll come back to next time, but I'll have to give that some thought.
Maybe the great outdoors.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a good segue.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We gotta work on that. I was thinking some of the older stuff, but that'd be a good one to go to as well. All right. That's all the time we got for today, John. Appreciate it. Again, don't forget to pay your taxes today, folks. As much as we want to see tax rates lowered, we want to see government take fewer of your dollars, we still wholeheartedly believe that you should render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And so with that, we'll sign off, and we will see you next time on ITR Live.